I'm Mike.
I'm Austin.
We are the test drivers.
And we put tech through its paces.
And Austin, this week, we're taking the show to the moon, baby! But later. We're going to talk about, if you know what I'm talking about, we're going to talk about that later. If you don't, Professor Austin has a story for you all. But I wanted to follow up with you on the S21.
Yes.
Because when we spoke last time, you didn't have one. At least the S21, I don't think you had, right? Or was it the Ultra you didn't have? I don't remember.
As we recorded the last episode, I actually did not have either in my hand yet. However,
Right.
I have now spent time with both the S21 and the Plus. And surprise, surprise, the Z Flip has been temporarily replaced by the S21. So I am currently rocking the Phantom Violet S21, which is definitely the best colorway of all of the S21s.
Except for Phantom Brown.
I still don't like that name. Look, I've actually been pleasantly surprised by this phone.
Okay.
So longtime test drivers listeners will remember when I flirted with the Pixel 5 last year. And honestly, there was a lot about the Pixel 5 that did draw me in a way that I didn't expect, right?
Mm-hmm.
The S21, I had a little bit of a better idea of like, okay, you know what? This actually kind of has a lot of those same sort of things. Like I can see myself enjoying it. Spoiler alert, there actually are a couple of issues that sort of were surprising to me, but there's a lot that is really good with this phone. So when you put it side by side with Z Flip, first of all, the screen is obviously much better, right? Not only is it like the Gorilla Glass Victus, which I don't have to worry about scratching with my fingernail, but the 120 hertz is just really nice, right? I mean, I know we've talked about this a million times. High refresh rate is not some kind of like, you have to have it kind of feature, but it's also really nice, right? Especially with the new Snapdragon 888. I mean, it's fast, it's fluid, and yeah, this might be the cheaper $800 phone, but like, you would never notice. It really is as fast as any Android phone I've ever used, and still slightly faster than the iPhone 12 mini.
Is the 888 faster than the whatever it is, A12? Wait, A15? What? Oh my God, are we A14?
14. No, it is not. It's a little bump over the previous generation of Snapdragon, the 865 Plus. It's not a huge jump though.
Right.
I think it's between that and the 120 hertz. And obviously Samsung have done a fairly good job of sort of tuning it. It feels good, right? I mean, you're kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but I can notice, especially as I've spent a lot of time with stuff like the M1 MacBook and the iPhone 12 mini that have this A14 and the Firestorm cores, you can tell, or at least I can tell a little bit of a difference with just how speedy and fast these things are with like loading web pages and whatnot. So it's an improvement. It's certainly as good as it gets on the Android side, but I can tell a little bit of a difference, but certainly not enough to make me go, oh, this is garbage and terrible. And I can only watch 8K video on this. Ugh.
Yeah, they're close, right? They're close enough, I guess, in performance. But as you say, like the performance story in all phones, especially Android to iPhone, is different for many different reasons, right? Where Apple has the ability to tune the software and the hardware perfectly together. But then on Android phones, you get things like 120 hertz refresh rates. So
yeah,
they have different like pluses and minuses. You know, I'm still really hoping 2021 is the year of the high refresh rate iPhone, and I'm really keen to see what that does to the overall expectation of the experience from the iPhone, from like a responsiveness perspective. Like, because I think it's going to be super interesting to see. I remain very keen.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the iPad Pro, right, which is at this point, 2 generations behind on the SoC, and it still feels very snappy. So you imagine an A14 or an A15 or something in a new iPhone. I mean, that thing's going to scream. I will say, though, there are some other good points on the S21. The cameras are a proper jump over the Z Flip and really actually do rival the iPhone 12 in a lot of ways. So there was a lot of talk about how the S21 has very similar cameras to, you know, last year. And that is true. Like the hardware is quite similar, but they've improved the processing and the software. And honestly, last year's cameras were also just really good to the point where the Z Flip just feels like it's behind, right? I mean, I would still use the Z Flip, you know, for, you know, being able to hold the phone up and use it for a selfie using the little outer screen, you know, having it in flip mode where I can like set it down and walk away and take a photo. Like those kind of things are helpful. Beyond that, the S21 is just so much better, right? The main camera is not only a larger sensor, but it really does come fairly close to the iPhone 12. Ultra wide is great. And having a telephoto, especially a 3x telephoto, is so much better than the lack of telephoto on the Z Flip or on the 12 mini.
Well, and also, I mean, you mentioned selfies. Like the selfie cameras on these are incredible, right?
It's good. I know that the Ultra has a 40 megapixel.
Oh, yes, the Ultra. Yeah, it's not the regular one.
I believe this is 10 megapixels on this. I mean, the selfie is fine, but none of the selfie cameras can actually match the Z Flip just, flipped around, using its actual main rear camera with the little screen, which is the way I would pretty much always take selfies. So
I always find myself consistently frustrated with the quality of selfie cameras on phones. Like, it just surprises me that, like, selfies must be such a common thing, right? On smartphones. I don't understand why they lag so much. I know that, I don't know. I'm sure that they have to be a bit more particular about the size of the components going into, where you can put that camera, but it still just remains a thing that I always find so perplexing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you really nailed it there. They're always trying to push the size down, right? I mean, the S21, the notch or the little like sort of hole punch is tiny, right? It is really, really small, which is great because I mean, it's gotten to the point where I don't even notice it really. But on the flip side, the smaller you make that punch, the smaller you make that lens and sensor and everything, you're just going to be fundamentally limited by the quality. I mean, it's a good camera, but just unless people are okay with a, big sort of like notch or something for it, or you get some of the more creative ways where like the Asus, they have like the Zenfone where the rear camera flips around, or you have something like the Z Flip where you can just easily take a selfie with the rear facing camera. I mean, that's all nice, but I think most people prioritize the look and the functionality of the phone over the quality of the selfie camera.
Yeah, you're probably right. So the S21 is the one that you're using, which is the smallest. We've been talking about this for pretty much as long as the show's been around, that you've been looking for smaller phones. But this isn't a small phone, even the smallest one.
I would say it's small-ish. So it's, I believe, 6.2 inches on the display. So it is certainly bigger than the Pixel 5, which, again, I keep referencing that because the Pixel 5 was like a very good size. Like, personally, for me, that's what a smallish size phone should be. Mind you, the iPhone 12 mini I still kind of prefer, but between the 12 mini and the Pixel, the trade-offs aren't massive. I mean, you get a little bit of a bigger screen, but it's also not unwieldy. The S21 is a touch larger, but it's certainly far better than the vast majority of the other, like the Pluses or the Ultras, which feel like you're stuffing an iPad in your pocket.
But 6.2, that's like iPhone 12 size, right?
It is, yeah. I would say it's roughly similar. I believe it's a little taller and a little narrower.
Yeah, the iPhone's 6.1 and the Mini is 5.4. So, like, I know I wouldn't say it's smallish. It just feels like regular, right? But, I mean, I know the dimensions, like the physical dimensions probably help because it is a narrower phone. But, when you say about comparing it to the Mini, I mean, it's still very different, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, Samsung phones generally are taller and narrower than iPhones, especially because of their screen aspect ratio. But yeah, size is fine. Software I'll actually give a shout out to. I will say I still don't have Android 11 on Z Flip, which I've been really missing because that rolled out on every other S20 already like months ago. So having it on the S21, having Android 11, having the latest version of One UI is nice. Like some of the notifications, and they've kind of given a little bit of a visual overhaul. That's been something I've appreciated on the S21 that will show up on the Z Flip at some point, hopefully, maybe.
Because that's One UI 3, right?
3 or 3.1? Yeah. It's the most recent. It's Android 11, but yeah, they've definitely redone some of the UI elements. But here's the problem. It doesn't fold in half. So it's clearly not a Z Flip Gang approved device.
So, but tell me though, right? Because, I was talking to another co-host of mine recently, another show that I do. I think it was Connected. And Federico and Steven were a bit like, why? Because I was trying to sell them on the form factors, right? The potential folding form factors. We were talking about this and the idea that there's a rumor that like Apple was looking into it, right? And I was going through the different form factors, and I think really you've got one of two these days. You've got a phone that folds in half into a clamshell, or you have some kind of like phone that becomes a bigger phone and has a screen on the outside. They're like two current approved methods of doing this thing effectively. And they kind of couldn't get their head around the like utility of a clamshell phone. And I know it's not news to listeners of this show, but what is it specifically that you're missing when you're not using a folding, like a Z Flip type phone?
So the size is obviously part of it, right? Like I just like a smaller phone. It's easy to like toss in my back pocket or something. Right. Whereas the S21 is just too big and sort of bulky for something like that.
The physical footprint is much different. Okay.
But also there's functionality there, right? So one of the things I love doing is using it in the sort of like the half flip mode, like the tabletop mode or whatever they call it, where like the screen is like half folded, which means it stands up by itself, right? I will watch YouTube videos like that all the time at work or in bed or something. Sometimes I'm like on like a video call or something and I don't want to have to hold the phone, so I set it down, but I can still look at the screen. Nice. There's a lot of that stuff that's really nice, and I feel like I'm stuck in 2019 with a big slab phone in my pocket, which is fine. I mean, look, of course, as Z Flip gang members, we know that this phone is very expensive. No one who makes fiscally responsible decisions, like we'll talk about in the second part of the episode, should really buy a Z Flip at the moment with how expensive it is, considering that the S21, by pretty much all objective measurements, is faster, better screen, better cameras, all these things it kind of has going for it, and it's like half the price. But it doesn't fold, which makes me kind of sad. Although that Phantom Violet is seriously nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is really good.
Look, not harping on it, but how did the build feel, right? It's not glass, it's different, it's like plastic. Yeah. How was that? How's the experience of that? What are the pros and cons for you coming back to that type of material again in a flagship?
I do not mind it one bit. This is not, so I think a lot of people think like plastic, like Galaxy S4, glossy, like kind of like cheap feeling plastic. This is not that at all. The only way, it has like a similar kind of like soft touch texture where it's like it's matte. The only real reason why I can tell that this is plastic and not glass is because it's not cold to the touch, which I think is a very big compliment that this plastic has kind of come so far. And you have the side benefit of never really worrying about cracking the back glass. I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but it's certainly going to be a lot more durable than something like a glass back. So no, I would never complain about it, right? I mean, sure, the Plus and the Ultra have the same Gorilla Glass Victus. And I mean, look, the Gorilla Glass feels great, right? But I actually don't mind having that little bit of a difference in texture. And because they do that same kind of matte finish on both, it looks fine. And actually, it feels fine, but it actually looks fine too, right? The way that they've done the material and specifically the way that sort of Phantom Violet color matches with the gold, or I guess the bronze or whatever you want to call it, but like the actual metal like ring around it and the camera bump, really, really clean. Zero complaints. But you know where this is going, right?
Yeah, I know where it's going.
Yeah, let's go. Although, while yes, as soon as we finish recording this episode, the Z Flip might sneak its way back into my pocket.
Yeah.
However, Mike, I have a little bit of a secret for you. There's one more phone. I got to stop one more time on the Z Flip train with another device before I land back with the Z Flip. And we might talk about that next episode. See, some foreshadowing right there. I got really? one more coming up that we got to...
I don't even know what that could be, but I guess that's the point, right? It's like, of course I don't know. I don't have it.
It's going to be both a obvious choice to talk about on the test drivers and something that almost no one is going to guess, but you can give it a try if you want.
Oh man, I can't wait. This episode of The Test Drivers is brought to you by Mint Mobile. After the year we've all been through, saving money, it's on a lot of our minds right now. If that's you, if you're still paying wild amounts of money every year for wireless, what are you doing? Switching to Mint Mobile is the easiest way to save this year. As the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, Mint Mobile lets you maximize your savings with plans starting at just $15 a month. By going online only and eliminating the traditional costs of retail, Mint Mobile is able to pass these significant savings on to you. This is premium wireless service for $15 a month. All this comes with unlimited talk and text and high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone of any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same number along with all your existing contacts. And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with the 7-day money-back guarantee. Austin, can you tell our listeners just how easy it is to get signed up to Mint Mobile?
I mean, it is incredibly fast. They will ship a SIM card directly to your door. It takes just a couple minutes to swap it up, and you are good to go. And the nice thing about Mint Mobile is you're getting that same high quality of service and the speed that you expect without the giant price tag that you usually associate with that.
So you can get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and the plan shipped to your door for free. Just go to mintmobile.com/testdrivers. That is mintmobile.com/testdrivers. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/testdrivers. Our thanks to Mint Mobile for their support of this show and Relay FM. So you were talking a minute ago about the high price of the Z Flip and why it's not a wise fiscal decision. But then Samsung have gonna made it a little bit easier on you, right?
Yeah. So just a few days ago, they cut the price of the Z Flip 5G. So specifically the 5G, not the 4G version, which is slightly strange, from $1,450 down to $1,200, not $200. That would be a really good
That'd be incredible. Fire sale.
Oh. Okay, well let's not throw words like fire sale and Z Flip around in the same sentence, Mike. Okay, let's not get crazy here. Okay, fire sale bad, good sales numbers and continuing to develop good.
Good.
It's weird. So like obviously the Z Flip has been around in one iteration or another for essentially a year now. And while the 5G has only been out for 6-7 months or so, it does kind of make sense that they trim the price a little bit, clear that inventory out, because I'm pretty confident, as we've discussed in the past, that there's another Z Flip coming soon. In fact, maybe even multiple models. But one of the interesting things is that the mobile president of Samsung, TM Rowe, he actually mentioned how 2021 will make, quote, folding phones more accessible, which, come back around to previous episodes, I think bodes really well for the Z Flip gang. I really think that there's going to be, obviously now there's a $1,200 Z Flip, which is not a crazy value proposition. It's still certainly a lot more expensive and not as good in some ways as the S21, but that's still a very nice step. And if they can get another Z Flip 2 in that rough price range, I think they'll do all right.
The word accessible here,
more accessible, not accessible.
Yeah,
more.
But, you can reduce it by $5 and it's a little bit more accessible. I think they shouldn't say 2021. It's just going into the future, the goal is to make them more accessible. I think that's fair, right? That maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, these things cost $800-900 or whatever the current flagship price is. You keep chipping away at it as they get better at the technology. The R&D costs are starting to be recouped, all of that kind of stuff. And you can start bringing the cost down. $1,200 is much better than $1,450, for sure. That is a huge difference. They've got to get it down. They've got to start really pushing at getting these down to the 1,000 mark. But I think we're probably still a couple of years away from that.
We'll see. I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked if we see $1,000 or maybe $1,100 Z Flip. It's possible, right? They just take the Z Flip 5G, update the chassis a little bit, throw a new processor inside, call it a day. They could if they want. Maybe Z Flip Lite.
I feel like the key though for them right now is to continue iterating on design. That's what's gonna make people understand why this is cool, right? It's you look at Z Flip or Z Fold, sorry, you go from the Fold to the Z Fold 2. The difference in design was huge, staggering.
Yeah.
And made the product so much more desirable. And I think at the very least, they have to update the visuals for the new kind of Samsung aesthetic for the Z Flip. But I think, stuff like what we were talking about a few weeks ago, a larger outside screen, all of that stuff is I think really important. And they do need to get there as well as trying to get the price down. So they've definitely got a job on their hands.
Yeah. And one of the funny things is if you actually go to the Samsung site right now, they still sell the 4G Z Flip. However, they sell the 4G Z Flip for $1,300, $100 more than the 5G.
What?
I think it's because they don't sell the unlocked anymore. They just sell it through carriers. So I assume the carriers have like their own deal. But like, yeah, right now you can pay more at a carrier for a 4G Z Flip than you can get an unlocked 5G Z Flip for.
And like, it's worth just noting, a 5G Z Flip works on 4G networks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
it's
like,
an upgraded processor. You've got 5G capability. Yeah, it's a better version of the phone, no doubt. But it's less expensive now. So
well, you don't get the sick purple color. Oh, the purple color's out of stock anyway. So
it doesn't even matter.
That's funny. I want to give you an update on my I don't call it a gaming PC, just my PC. I ordered 2 parts after our last episode.
Okay.
I got a power supply, which has arrived. I got the Silverstone SFX 80 Plus Titanium.
Ooh.
It's an 800 watt power supply.
Very nice.
I went with a CPU cooler, the fan, and completely decided no liquid in the computer. No liquid. And I've ordered a Noctua NHD 15.
Classic.
These were your recommendations. This is they were both back ordered when I ordered them. The power supplies arrived. They keep bumping the date on the Noctua fan, on the cooler. Hopefully by the end of this month I'll get it. But again, it's like I said, I expect I'll probably build this maybe next month sometime.
Okay.
So I've still got some time, but I want to keep chipping away at this. I'm thinking probably every episode now I'll just ask you for what part I need next. So now I want to start thinking about motherboards, because I expect of all the parts I have left, this is probably going to be the one that I might struggle with the most or have less options for. Because stuff like RAM and like SSDs and all that kind of stuff, I have more options, and I figure the products that I have available to me have less of an overall impact. But the motherboard is pretty important. So,
yeah, you might need one of those.
Yeah, gonna need one. But it's also like there's sizing constraints and functionality constraints, which might mean that I need to wait for one, rather than like if I want RAM, by and large, I have a lot of options available to me.
Yeah. And so actually, that's one of the things, specifically because you're using the O11 Mini. It is unlike most cases in where it is very configurable, right? Like most chassis, you can put a couple different sizes of boards in. But with the way that the O11 Mini is, you actually can change the amount of slots. So I think it's 3, 5, and 7 slot configurations. And each one of those gives you more or less clearance to put like radiators or various different components everywhere. And because of that, you could easily go with a couple options. So if you were going to go with the ITX style, which is typically meant more for like, systems that have a lot of water cooling, there are a couple of boards like the ROG, the Strix X570i, or I personally really like the Gigabyte Aorus Pro X570i. We've used both of them in builds. I've used specifically that Aorus build in several systems. The nice thing about these boards is that they're very compact. Specifically, I think the Aorus is probably the best looking one for like kind of overall aesthetic. The thing is, though, is that these are the ITX boards, right? Which, depending on what all you plan on installing, may not be enough. Do you think you're going to end up installing like a 4K capture card internally or anything else? Or are you thinking you're just going to drop a graphics card in and everything else will be external?
Well, I can imagine being totally fine with using an external capture card if I ever wanted to do that. I don't think I would necessarily want to make a motherboard decision based on that, because I don't know how likely it is that I would. I mean, because I already have one of the Elgato external capture card things anyway, so I would be totally fine using that rather than feeling the need to install one.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I'll say is that if you aren't planning on obviously water cooling, you're going to have space in the case. It may make sense to go with a larger board anyway, because otherwise, I mean, it's just going to be empty on the bottom, unless you could obviously do things like, install extra fans, which really shouldn't impact things. Or if you want to do any like decorations, like we've actually done a couple of systems where we've actually like built little like dioramas in the bottom. I don't imagine you're going to go that crazy with it. So it may make sense to go up to a full-size ATX board, and that way you have the ability to, take advantage of that expansion. You can throw in a sound card as if it's 2003 again, or capture card or whatever later.
I may as well make this decision with the possibility of giving myself additional flexibility in the future, especially because as my needs change, I guess one of the things I really don't want to have to change is my motherboard.
Yeah.
Because that's just going to be a real pain.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And yeah, there's everything's attached there. So then let me find you this. Let me see if I can find you an ATX X570 board that's in stock. There are several. In fact, actually, it's going to be easier to find that than the ITX models.
Right.
And I think with that, that'll also give you a few additional configuration options. Like you can go for 4 DIMMs of memory instead of 2, which will mean you either have expansion or you can just save some money by getting, 8 gigs modules.
I was going to say, like, I can get smaller sticks then, but still get the same amount.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay, next step, we'll find you an ATX board, which hopefully should be in stock. Generally, motherboards have been a little easier to find than a lot of the other components, which are impossible to find right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just, we have a few retailers here in the UK, and I've just found a page of AMD X570 ATX motherboards, and they're like, there's like 50 on here, and they're all in stock. So
yeah, that part, we can handle that part. Actually, you're getting close, though. You've got most of the components in. I think building it next month seems very doable.
Yep. I'm excited. I'm very excited. All right, so now I'm relying on you to find me some recommendations for an ATX board. Yeah, it's so great to have a tech YouTuber as a friend. It's just like so good. It's like, please help me. I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't. I've tried to, like, really the best that I can end up doing with this stuff is I just like follow somebody's list of parts. It is complicated. Like, I know I could learn it in the same way that I've learned so much about keyboard builds and stuff and like all keyboard components, but I feel like I don't want to put the effort in because I only really want to build one PC. Right? Like, learning all of the ins and outs of every potential power option is maybe more useful when you're building PCs a lot.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, you've built one PC in the past, which was what, 2-3 years ago?
Oh man, it was way longer than that. But yeah, many years ago.
Yeah. So it's like, it's different when stuff is constantly coming out and you watch Linus Tech Tips religiously. It makes your life a lot easier in finding all of these components. But yeah, you'll be able to join the ranks of PC gamers and hardcore streamers and Windows people soon enough.
I mean, I use Windows once a week. It's fine. I can get on board. I wanted to give you I wanted to talk about it's that time of year for earnings reports and stuff like that. Typically not of interest to the show, but the thing that I was keen about was Sony, because they gave their first indication of PS5 sales, like actual real numbers, and they've sold 4.5 million PS5s in 2020. So in the final quarter of the year, the holiday quarter, they sold 4.5 million of them, which is actually pretty similar to the PlayStation 4 launch. Yeah. But it's also worth remembering, I've seen a lot of articles of like, oh, it's similar to the PS4 launch. The PS4 launch was considered very good for them, right? So they have had a great opening quarter for the PlayStation 5.
And I have zero doubt that they sold every single PS5 they could.
Yes.
And they could have sold twice as many if they would have been able to manufacture that many. I mean, I'm still looking, just even like this morning, resale market for PS5s is still close to double retail. I know for a while it was like, $1,000, $1,100 was pretty common for a $400 to $500 PS5. Now it's come down to a little closer to like $800 to $900. But I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that they will sell every single PS5 they can make probably through the rest of this year before stock becomes even close to being normal.
Yeah, because I think one of the big differences for the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4 is this really enhanced hype market that they've walked into. I don't remember it being like this. There's always resellers, but the prevalence of bots and all that kind of stuff has definitely made it harder to get your hands on this stuff. Microsoft, I didn't know this. I was looking into it. I was like, oh, okay, so what have Microsoft done? And they actually, in November, Phil Spencer went on an interview tour, and Microsoft announced that they will not be disclosing unit sales anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that they say they care now more about, quote, monthly active users. So 2 things to this. One, considering Microsoft's approach to subscriptions, not just Gold and All Access and the whatever one it is where you get the console as well. Is that All Access? And then
that is All Access, and then there's Game Pass. Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would think in the monthly active users realm of like, well, the more monthly active users you have, the more subscription revenue you're bringing in. So if subscription revenue is your bread and butter, which I think they're trying to make it, you want to do what you can to increase your monthly active user count because that is inherent to customer satisfaction. People like paying, like what they're getting, they're going to keep paying, right? Makes perfect sense. This is also what you do if you are not going to win.
Well, so this is something they actually did in the Xbox One generation as well, because I know that the first, I don't know, year, 2 years or so of Xbox One sales they announced, and then they just stopped because the PS4 was outselling them. Every once in a while, you get a little glimpse. Like I know, like EA at one point kind of had mentioned that they had roughly doubled the install base of PS4 to Xbox One, which probably, if you extrapolate out, is accurate throughout the generation. And while I don't necessarily think that the PS5 is outselling the Xbox 2-1, because I think Microsoft is in the exact same position of selling every single Xbox they can, both Series S and Series X, although it does seem like the Series S supply, it's not readily available, but it's actually getting a little closer. Like sometimes actually it's in stock for more than 30 seconds at a time. But same thing, I think Microsoft are going to be at least through the next 3, 4, 5 months or so selling all the consoles they can. I think the only real way for us to know how this generation is going to go sort of more long-term is just when they can build enough of these things and they're actually sitting on store shelves, because obviously there seems to be more hype around PS5. Everyone wants PS5. It's such a meme right now. But without Microsoft telling us how many Xboxes they're selling besides like record quarter, the most we've ever sold, et cetera, I don't think we're going to get a really clear one-to-one comparison on how this generation is going, at least until we start getting some of these like Activision accidentally mentions how many Xbox games they sold versus PlayStation games or something like that we have to kind of work our way back from.
But the main reason I wanted to bring all of this up is Nintendo. In the same quarter, they sold 11.5 million Switches.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Especially for a console that's what,
2017
years old? Wow.
Yep. They sold close to, it's over double, nearly 3 times the amount of PlayStations. So you could imagine they sold 3 to 4 times the amount of Xboxes. This was Nintendo's biggest quarter ever for the Switch.
Wow. That is insane. And this quarter saw no new Switch Lite, right? That was a while ago.
Nope.
No price cut, nothing. Just people buying the console, which has been out 4 years now.
There were no games.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I can't even think, like, what was the last big Switch launch, right?
Well, it was Animal Crossing. It was a year ago.
Well, a year ago, yeah.
This is just people that wanted them, and like for the holidays, that's all it was. And they saw, like, it was wild. Like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe crossed 30 million downloads, as did Animal Crossing as well. So like Animal Crossing is still one of the key drivers here of Switch sales at the moment, like even after a year. So now the Switch has passed the 3DS in terms of lifetime sales.
And that's so fast because 3DS, I mean, obviously, I guess technically still is being sold, but 3DS had, 8, 9 years to hit that kind of number, and the Switch needed 3.
Well, they still sold 730,000 Switches in this last quarter.
3DSs?
3DSs, sorry. In this last quarter, 730,000 of them, which is, I mean, the reports that I read is like, it's definitely dying now. That's way more than I would have expected. What is it? What is there even on the 3DS now?
I actually think that was games, not consoles. Wait, let me double check.
No, you're right. That was games.
Yeah,
that was games. But still, 730,000 3DS games still being sold. Who's buying them? Wild to me.
There are still in some stores. They used to have like the $20 like sort of greatest hits collections that I see, but I haven't seen a 3DS or a 2DS on a shelf in a long time.
No.
I don't even know. Technically I think they're still under production somewhat, but yeah, I think it's one of those things where like there are no new 3DS games, which makes sense. I mean, it's like an old console. They said the same thing when they brought out the DS. Like, we're going to keep making the Game Boy. You've got the Game Boy Micro. You know, they make it seem like the console's not dead until a year or two later when it's dead, right? Which
Nintendo haven't killed it, but they're also not making a lot of games for it. It's like, maybe like 1 or 2 a year.
It's not dead. We're just not making it anymore. Don't worry about it.
But like, it's just wild to me. Like Nintendo, it's not even just the number, it's the fact that they just had their biggest quarter. And it came out of nowhere for them. Like, they've now adjusted their sales estimates for the year and stuff. Like, really, like, it's unbelievable. You know, this is at a time when we're all kind of expecting the next Switch.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to do it?
I mean, they don't need to.
Exactly. So, like, would you? Like, so if you're in charge at Nintendo and you have Switch 2 on the horizon, would you pull that trigger yet?
No way. Throw it another year. Give it another year. I mean, obviously, there's something to be said about, like, you know, riding the wave and not kind of like ruining your momentum. But also, I mean, there's been talk of a Switch Pro that may or may not even have a portable component. And will we see it this year? I mean, we very well could. But if I'm Nintendo and I'm looking at these sales going like, well, do we really need to? And the answer is absolutely not. They don't need to at all. It's only a thing of like, do they think that this will help them sell even more Switches this year? It's nuts, man. It's nuts.
This episode is brought to you by SyncUp, a OneDrive podcast. I love finding new podcasts. I know that you do too. If you're looking for something new to listen to, SyncUp takes you behind the scenes of OneDrive. So you'll be able to learn how to connect your files, share your documents, and work from anywhere, whilst also hearing about the design and development side of things too. Every single episode of SyncUp includes a dedicated topic with guest interviews, news and announcements, and something special outside of the technology norm to mix things up. Some of the recent topics discussed on the show include data security, remote work, and mobile productivity. I checked out an episode recently that focused on how collaboration is becoming all the more important in today's modern working world. Like, from a technology perspective, this does also mean that the tools that we use need to work better together too. It's not just collaboration between people, it's also within the tools that we use. And this episode is full of insights into how we can use this focus to help the work of administrators and managers in organizations better connect data and applications together. So go and listen to it now. Just search for SyncUp wherever you get your podcast. That's SYNCUP, or just click the link in the show notes. That's SYNCUP, SyncUp. Go and check it out right now. Our thanks to SyncUp from Microsoft for their support of this show and Relay FM. All right, it's time to go to the moon. So, this episode was recorded on February 4th, 2021. I feel like this is just like super important to note the point in time, because this is a story that's changing constantly. And
like every day.
This was something that you were like, I really want to talk about it on the show. So we're talking about GameStop and day trading and shorting, and I guess crypto a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on?
Everything is the short answer. So I spent a good chunk of yesterday trying to like kind of condense my thoughts on this and try to come up with a simple explanation. And I don't think there is one. There's a lot going on, right? I mean, even last night, one of the cryptos that has been kind of very memey and kind of jumping up and down has been Dogecoin. Are you familiar with Dogecoin?
Well, I know the meme Doge, right? The dog. Mm-hmm. And I was familiar when Dogecoin came about during one of the like original crypto explosions. Yep. So I'm familiar enough with it. It's just an incredible thing to say, but a meme of cryptocurrency, but
absolutely.
It's also an actual cryptocurrency.
It's like in a lot of ways, and obviously there's a lot more to talk about in the episode, but like Dogecoin in a lot of ways is almost like kind of like the training wheels for crypto. It's very, very inexpensive, but it works the same way as all the bigger ones. It's just like, you know, it's 2 cents per Dogecoin or whatever, whereas Bitcoin is 35,000 or whatever the case is, right? So typically it's been used as more of a joke, as more of kind of like a way to learn. But the thing is, everyone has been so like attached to this saga that Dogecoin's been jumping up. And just last night, they finally got Elon Musk to tweet about it and to the moon.
Oh my God.
But okay, that's just what happened last night. Every day
and
it's
also,
been crazy.
Just before we continue, the test drivers is responsible for nothing here. You cannot take any advice from us. If you think anything is advice, that's on your own. It's got literally nothing to do with us. There you go. I just wanted to just get that out there before we continue.
When you put your life savings in Dogecoin and you lose it, don't come complain to us, please.
Yep. We never told you to do anything.
All right. So here's the kind of the breakdown of what's going on. So this all mostly began, and it's complicated, but this mostly began with GameStop. Now, Mike, I'm assuming you're familiar with the retail game store company GameStop, correct?
Yeah, I think we had GameStops here for a while, but if not,
really?
we have stores very much like this one, right? It's a video game store, and then they ended up pivoting into bring your old stuff in and we'll buy it from you kind of thing.
Yes, and GameStop was a very good business for think like the Xbox 360, PS3 time, where you go and you buy Call of Duty.
You could only buy your games in stores. Like that was where you did it. There either wasn't an internet download system, or it was so slow you just wouldn't do that. You needed to go and buy your video games. There wasn't really Amazon. Right, so you'd go to GameStop, or you'd go to we had a company here called Game. There are lots of them. That's where you would go and buy your video games. That's old guys over here.
And they really cornered the market on the used game side, which is really where they made their money. You go buy $60 for Call of Duty or whatever. You play it, you're done with it, you flip it, they give you 15 cents, and then they turn around and sell it to the next sucker for $45 or whatever. Right?
What a racket! What a racket!
That is true. But GameStop has seen maybe not the most strong of fortunes over the last 5 years or so, as more and more games are being downloaded. Fewer and fewer people are buying and selling physical games. They've pivoted into a lot of other things. I think they invested, or they bought some MVNO. They were involved in carriers. They would buy and sell phones and iPads and all kinds of stuff. They've tried to diversify, but generally speaking, this is a ton of sort of physical, mall and shopping center retail locations that buy and sell physical games, right? So logic would probably dictate that that's not the strongest market to be in the world.
Yeah, I read something which is particularly prevalent to you or relatable to you, is they've actually been doing really well in Pokemon card sales recently as well.
Yes. So they have, and they also have other geek stuff. So they show shirts and all the various kind of accessories and collectibles. Yeah, there's certainly, you can walk into a GameStop. There's a good supply of nerd culture stuff, not just video games.
Yeah.
And online they have old consoles. GameStop is not a terrible place, and I personally have always enjoyed going to GameStop. We've done some videos at GameStop, but let's just say that Wall Street didn't quite share that same opinion. So essentially, GameStop, as of the end of last year and even the beginning of this year, was one of the most heavily shorted stocks around. Now, there's no way to get into this without getting kind of nerdy. So a short is pretty simple, realistically. If I buy a stock, I am buying that stock hoping that it's going to go up, right? Obviously, if it goes up, I can sell it for more. If it goes down, I sell it for less. But that's the way that buying a stock works. A short is basically the opposite of that, in that I am betting that a stock will go down, and you're essentially borrowing it, and then you have to pay interest. It's kind of complicated, but it's essentially the same kind of math of, if I am some big Wall Street hedge fund, I look at GameStop and go, oh, this is a terrible business to be in. It's obviously going to go down. I think this stock price is too high, so I'm going to bet that price goes down. And if it goes down, I'm going to make a ton of money.
All right, I need to stop you right here.
Go for it.
Okay, so like many people in the world over the last few weeks, I have tried to get my head around just the fundamentals of short in stocks, right? Which is what we're talking about here, shorts. And every time I feel, it's like trying to hold sand. Every time I feel like I understand it, it slips through my fingers again. So what happened here, and what does happen here, is typical Wall Street investors, hedge fund managers, they take a look at the markets and they do one of two things. They either see a stock that they think is going to rise and they buy that stock so they own it, and then when it goes up, they can sell it and they make their profit. Or they also, and that's called long, right? It's when you're making a long bet on a stock because you're waiting, or you are short in a stock. And that's what has happened. That was what was happening to GameStop. They thought that it was going to crash. So let's, this is where it's confusing.
No, you got it. You got it. No, that's exactly it.
They think that it's going to go down. So they buy now. Well, this is it. They're not buying the stock, right? This is what is so confusing to me.
They borrow the stock. So it is complicated.
How? Who? How do they borrow it?
Basically, they borrow the stock. They will. So if you buy the stock, they borrow the stock with the promise that if it goes up, they have to repurchase it, and they also have to have not only some money down, but also they pay interest. That's the kind of the longer version.
Right. So people that already own GameStop stock
Mm-hmm.
were entering into these agreements with, we'll just say hedge funds because it's easier and that's how everybody's talking about it. And they say, all right, you can take this bet from us, but you're going to pay us money while you're doing it, and you have to pay us if it goes up.
Yeah, well, they have to. So the way it would work is, so say I'm a hedge fund and I'm shorting it and I think it's going to go down, right? If it goes up, every time it goes up, I'm on the hook for that stock, right? So if I, short it and I think it's going to go down, all of a sudden it goes up by 50%, I then have to go into the market and buy that stock to give it back to the person I borrowed it from. So not only do you have like the fees and the interest and everything, but when it goes up, it gets very, very expensive, right?
But who owns the stock? Let's use me and you here, right?
Yeah.
I am a prudent investor and I own stock in GameStop. You are a nasty hedge fund manager and you want to short me. So what are you doing from me then? Do you buy it from me, or are you just saying, hey, let me borrow this?
I essentially, the way I understand it is I am borrowing it from you. I will pay you a little bit of money and I will give you interest. And if I'm able to then, the price goes down, I can then cash out and I will have made money on the difference between where I borrowed it and when I sold it, right? So basically, the simple way to think about it is a short is just the opposite of buying a stock, and that if the stock price goes down, I can then make money on the difference between that transaction, right?
How? How do you make the money, though, on the difference?
Because I have sold the stock. Okay, you got me there. I actually don't fully understand that part.
Wait, so let's say you've taken it from me.
Yes.
And you've sold it out to the market, so you made $100, right? But you got to give it back to me eventually. So then you would need to buy it from someone else, right, for $50, and then...
Yes. Yes. Okay, that is the way I believe it works, I think.
This is confusing. See, this is the problem. All right, so tell a little story to you. I used to work in banking, but like retail banking. So like you would come in and open a bank account from me, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of things that happen to you when you're working in this type of world. Like everybody goes through realizations, and there are like two main realizations that people go through. The first is when you realize that the thing that you've always assumed in your life about money isn't what you think it is. And the first way that this comes into your life is when you go to the bank and you give them $1,000 and they take your money and then they put it in the safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
That money doesn't stay there, right? And I know this to a lot of people might seem like, well, obviously, but I don't think to as many people it's as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
If you give me at the bank $10,000 and then come back tomorrow and you want your $10,000, I might not have it anymore because I may have given money out to somebody else, or I have had the money collected and taken to like a money processing place or the larger vaults, or it's going back into circulation, right? So just because you've given me money doesn't mean you can come back and take it whenever you want. You may have to arrange that with the bank to make sure they have the cash there, and this is how like economies fail and people do what's called running on banks, where if things are looking bad, they go and try and take out as much money as they can. Like just because you've deposited that cash doesn't mean you can always get it. This is problem number one. Problem number two is when you come to realize that, getting high concept here, the value of money is not actually like a real thing based on much of anything.
Yep.
And like if I wanted to give Austin $20, I can just go to my phone and just send in $20. Nothing actually exchanged. It's just the number went down in my account and up in his account. And we all have to just agree that this is how it works. And you can really go back and say, like, we have like this gold bullion and that is the value of money. But I'll tell you right now, it does not work that simply anymore. And so like that, I'm saying all of this as a way to, you can very easily trip yourself up when you're trying to explain this stuff, which I think so far we've done a pretty decent job of tripping ourselves up, because you get to a certain point in the stack and it stops making logical sense unless you really understand what is going on. And the people that really understand what is going on are the people that make careers out of this stuff. So suffice it to say, basically, the hedge fund managers are taking a bet on GameStop failing. So they only make money if GameStop stock goes down. If GameStop stock doesn't go down, they are on the hook until it does. And that means if that person then wants to cash out, that person, the hedge fund manager who borrowed that stock, has to pay the money, right?
Yeah.
Essentially. Again, still complicated, but that is the basics the best that we can do to get you to the point of understanding what the short position stuff is.
Exactly. Shorts are generally a little bit more risky because buying and selling a stock is a little bit more straightforward, but because you're shorting it, there is like the interest in their stuff. So generally speaking, you can't just short and just be like, oh, I'm just going to wait a couple years for the stock to come back down, because you're paying on that all the time, right? And if it doesn't go down, you're going to be losing crazy money, right? So what happened was, Wall Street's looking at this and is like, you know what, this company, not in great shape, seems like a failing business. We're going to short it. Right, which is something that has happened forever, right? I mean, there are lots and lots of stocks that have been shorted. Tesla, I think, is a very good example of something that has been shorted forever. People always think Tesla's going down, and it just keeps going up and up and up, right? So the thing with GameStop is that it seems like Wall Street may have gotten a little bit too eager to bet on it failing, because well, yeah, the business might not seem fundamentally strong and everything, but if you take a look, I mean, it's not like it's a terrible company. I mean, they've got cash in the bank. They've got a reasonable plan. They've got, some locations that are closing, but like they're kind of like trying to trim it down to the more kind of profitable stuff. Like it might not be a gangbusters business, but it also doesn't seem like a business that's about to go out of business or, collapse or anything like that, right? Mm-hmm. And they've actually had some good news recently. So the founder of Chewy.com, which might sound like a joke, but he sold it for like billions of dollars or whatever. He invested not only a good chunk of cash into GameStop, he owns something like, 10% or whatever. He owns like a decent chunk of GameStop. But then recently he's also come on and kind of helped to reshape the board. These are all things that are typically considered good signs, right? You've got some extra money in the company. You've got some new investors. You've got some new sort of people on the board to kind of help guide the company. This is all sort of good signs, right? Then things got a little crazy. Right. So for context, the stock, as of, even like middle of last year, $4, $5, $6, which is fine. Right. I mean, it's not obviously anywhere near as much as it used to be, but like that's fine. It started to come up and it sort of came up to a point where it's like 12, 13, 14, even $15, which is that's a big return. Right. But Wall Street Bets is a very popular subreddit. Right. And they got a hold of this. And that's when, I don't want to say sense was thrown out the window, but people got a little excited. Mike, they got a lot excited.
Mm-hmm. All right, so before we continue with Wall Street Bets, I just want to read this 2-paragraph thing I found on a website called Investopedia about stock shorting. So, one way to make money on stocks for which the price is falling is called short selling or going short. Short selling is a fairly simple concept. That's a lie. An investor borrows a stock, sells the stock, and then buys the stock back to return it to the lender. Short sellers are betting that the stock they sell will drop in price. If the stock does drop after selling, the short seller buys it back at a lower price and returns it to the lender. The difference between the sell price and the buy price is the profit. So when we were talking about how the profit's made, so you as Austin is saying to Mike, hey, let me take that. I'm going to borrow that from you. And you've then sold it into the market at $100. And I'm just like sitting here, I'm waiting, like I know that my stock's going down, but I'm playing a long game, right? So fine, I'll wait for it to go back up again. And then when your time expires, where you got to get it back for me, you then buy it back from the market and you buy it at $50 and give it back to me. So I'm just sitting here, I'm taking my interest or whatever on my fee, and I'm watching my shares go down, but you have now made $50. Mm-hmm. Because you borrowed it from me at 100, sold it into the market, and then bought it back when it was going down. It was at 50. So you now say, hey, here's your stock back, and you've come out of it $50 richer, except for the fees you paid to me.
Exactly.
Cool.
So this is where Wall Street Bets, which is a place that has been around for a while, right? I mean, it has a lot of people who are very serious investors, but I would describe a very memey kind of place. I think like the description on the subreddit is like if 4chan found a Bloomberg terminal or something. Like it's there's a lot of clowning going on, right, on Wall Street Bets.
And it's also nasty stuff too, right? Like I just want to make that clear that like some of the language and stuff like that on Wall Street Bets, it's not good.
Yes. But it's full of a lot of people who have real money to invest.
Yep.
And while I think there's like a little bit of a thing of like, oh, it's a bunch of, the everyman versus the big guys. There's also a lot of people who like post screenshots of like, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So clearly a lot of people who, have some cash.
There are people there that like they really know what they're doing as well. Like It's not just like a bunch of people that stumbled together and fell out of a clown car. Like this could only have ever started because there are people there that are smart investors. They're savvy investors.
Yes.
Because you have to have an understanding of this thing, which we're all struggling to get our heads around, to the point where you make the bet that this was ever going to happen, right?
Yes. And I think from Wall Street Bets perspective, right, there's a real narrative here, right, where, this is the opportunity for you to make some cash and you're like the little guy, trying to help GameStop and, you're going to make money and you're going to make the evil hedge funds, they're betting on GameStop collapsing. So not only do you get to kind of step in and feel like you're saving the company, but you're also sort of taking money directly from the rich, right? I mean, you can see that there's a real sort of narrative there, even though it's obviously not quite that sort of straightforward in real life. So have you ever seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street?
Love that movie.
Such a good movie.
Yeah.
This is kind of a little bit like that, except replace Leonardo DiCaprio with like tens of thousands of Redditors.
They're already making movies about this whole thing. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Netflix have bought an option for it.
I think there's a couple of movies. There's someone who's already sold the book. I mean, it's like this thing is literally happening as we speak right now. It's crazy. I look forward to the Reddit-tastic movie of some guy on his computer for an hour buying stocks or whatever. But so you look at the way that the stock has kind of been rising, right? So, it went from $5 to like $15, which is good, but it's not like totally crazy for the stock market, right? Stuff comes up, stuff goes down, whatever, right? But then things kind of took off. So Wall Street Bets had already kind of had their eye on this stock last year. There were some people who, putting big money in it. And, everyone was, because the way that Reddit is sort of designed, if you post a screenshot of your brokerage account where you drop 200 grand in GameStop, everyone's like, you're a crazy person, upvote, right? It's just going to be sort of naturally surfaced. A lot more eyeballs are going to see it. More people are going to start thinking, et cetera, et cetera. But then there was some activity around not only all the Chewy news where, there was all this good news for GameStop, but then there were some hedge fund guys who were like, hey, yeah, no, this is still going down. And Reddit didn't like that. So people started buying, right? And this is not something that would necessarily work for a company on like Apple's scale, right? The stock is expensive and there's just a lot of it out there, right?
Yeah.
But GameStop was, and I mean, technically still is, a much smaller company. So if you think 10,000 Redditors dumping a few $100 each, that actually can make a real difference to the stock price, right? And that's kind of what started to happen. Everyone on Wall Street Bets started getting excited, started buying it. The stock started to creep up and up and up. But then there's a thing called a short squeeze. Now, this is actually a little bit easier to understand because essentially all those people, all those hedge funds and everything who had shorted GameStop, well, as the price is going up, they have two choices. They put their money where their mouth is and they stick it out, or they bail on their positions, which is obviously going to lose the money. But if it's going up 20, 30, 50% a day, you got to imagine that very few people are going to stomach that kind of loss when you talk that these guys have thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of shares, right? Or probably even more than that, actually, considering how cheap it was. So as that happens, the short sellers essentially have to go and buy that stock back, right? Which then equals more price increases because more and more people are buying. And especially when some hedge fund has to, close their position and then they buy 500,000 shares of the stock, that's going to push the price up, right? All of this combined meant that GameStop went crazy, like actually crazy. I believe it topped out at like $450 or $60 at one point. Insanely expensive for a stock that, again, less than a year ago was going for like $4, $5.
And then at that point, they're also holding on to their stock too, right? And they won't sell it back to the people that have got short positions, and then it turns out that the shorters are overextended in the market, and they have more short positions than there is even GameStop stock to sell.
Man, it got crazy. It got crazy, right? I mean, there have been situations where you've seen the stock jump up, but usually that's related to like Nintendo selling the most Switches they've ever sold or whatever. But there was a little bit of something that sparked this. But this really was a war between Wall Street bets and the hedge funds.
It's based on nothing really happening.
Yes, exactly. It was very little. It was just a little spark, right? But the thing is, once the snowball started, it started, right? So you see the stock jumping up and up and up. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone is, like, hey, I'm just going to go open a Robinhood and I'll throw $100 at it or whatever the case is. Because you look at a stock that goes, so actually I can tell you from our experience, right? So personally, I did not buy any GameStop stock. That's not something that I typically do, especially with any kind of company that I would talk about in a video or podcast or anything like that, right? But we were talking about doing a This Is episode all about the situation. We were talking about it on, I believe it was a Monday morning, and the stock was at like $80 or $90, which was a huge increase over just a few days beforehand. We start putting the video together. We shoot the next day, and at that point, it was something like $220 or something in like 24 hours, right? That is an insane amount of money because for the stock market, if I put in whatever amount of money that day and I sold it the next day, I just doubled my money or more, right? I mean, it's a very simple thing on the standard stock side of things, and tons of people are jumping in and cashing out. But there's certainly never going to be a clean scenario in which everyone makes their money. And that's where things have kind of landed at the moment.
This episode is brought to you by Pingdom. Hey, do you have a website? Does your website have a shopping cart, registration forms, or contact us pages? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you need Pingdom. Because nobody wants their critical website transactions to fail. This means a bad experience for your users and could mean lost business for you. But the good news is you can set up transaction monitoring with Pingdom. Transaction monitoring will alert you when your cart, checkout forms, or login pages fail before they affect your customers and your business. Pingdom will let you know the moment that anything goes wrong in whatever way is best for you. You can customize how you're alerted and who's alerted depending on the outage severity to make sure the right person can be there to fix the issue. Pingdom cares about your users having the smoothest site experience possible, and if disaster strikes, you'll be the first to know. It's super easy to get started. Go to pingdom.com/relayfm right now for a 30-day free trial with no credit card required. Then when you sign up, use the code TESTDRIVERS at checkout to get a huge 30% off your first invoice. Our thanks to Pingdom from SolarWinds for their support of this show and Relay FM. Can you imagine being an executive at GameStop? Because tons of executives at companies have stock options, right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine the kind of money these people made?
Well, they only make it if they sell. And,
I mean, you will have sold, though, Austin.
Well, sometimes a lot of these options that you get as like,
if they got a vest, yeah.
Like you can only sell them in certain windows. And it's probably not a great look for the CEO of the company to start dumping all his stock frantically. Like, I got to get out. I mean, I believe in this company, but sell.
Man, there must have been an element of it at certain levels. And like, I really hope that these people were able to do it because why not, right? Like, this is never going to happen to them. Like, there are people that now can probably retire because of this.
Oh, absolutely.
The whole thing itself, though, I gotta say, I don't like it. Like, it makes me uncomfortable because, I think there's a certain element of worry about the fragility of the financial system. Not in that, like, I particularly care about hedge funds going bust, but I get a bit nervous when the like absurdity of the systems that our finances are built on are shown to the world. Like that stuff I was talking about earlier, right? So like I am for people like making a bit of money, poking the dragon a little bit. But the thing that one of the other things that I don't like about this is it's a similar thing to Tesla stock and Bitcoin. I worry about people losing their life savings to things like this.
Yes.
And so, like, I worry about... There seems to be a particular... Again, I'm not trying to get political, but, like, kind of, like, philosophically political of, like, this idea, which is sometimes encapsulated as like the American dream, and it's got other names elsewhere, of like get rich quick. And it's always a concern to me to see this kind of stuff, because that's where people start to get themselves into pretty tricky situations. You know, I can imagine a lot of people that bought into GameStop at a GameStop. I should call it GameStop. That should be the name of the company now. Like, who bought in at like 300, 400, and now it's down at like sub 100. I mean, you just lost 2/3 to 3/4 of your life savings if you did that. And that's the kind of thing that really worries me, you know, about these kinds of things, which is why, like, ultimately I have like a weird association with the stock market and the way that it operates. And because we have moved so far away from what this was intended to be.
Oh, it's speculation. It's betting. Yeah. It's not really tied to anything beyond sort of the push and pull of the market. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are pros and cons with this. I think this is certainly a moment in history, whether it's a little blip or something that we see happening more and more often. Because, you're right. There's certainly someone who dumped in a ton of money at $400, and it is very, very unlikely that it will ever go back to that. Certainly possible, but the trend very much is it kind of boomed up, and then it's been on the downslope.
All in on people getting Robinhood accounts, if that's the service they want to use. There's like a whole other can of worms. And they've got some disposable income, and they throw a couple of $100 in if that's what they have available to them, or $10, $50, and like they're having fun. And like, because this is one of the reasons this has happened, is the pandemic has a pandemic hobby is day trading. People are getting involved in day trading, and if you have a little bit of money, and you know, it's like I don't have a problem with people going to casinos and playing roulette, but I do have a problem with like when it gets too much. Right. And then,
of course,
you know, like sports betting is another one, right? Like you want to bet on your favorite team on the weekend, and like you're having fun with it. But then people are getting like really deep into it. Like, these things can always get nasty. And that's the kind of stuff that concerns me. And I think that this GameStop situation specifically has gone much further than these things typically go. And I think I'm worried about some of the fallout for individuals who got into it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there are upsides to this, right? I mean, there's certainly a lot of people who made a lot of money, right? I mean, it's not like it's all bad. And also some of the other like meme stocks, like I believe like AMC, which is a US based like cinema chain, they actually were able to improve their business, right? So they've had the same thing. Most of these meme stocks that kind of went up have kind of come down at this point. But AMC, I believe, were able to convert a lot of their actual like money debt that they owed into stock and essentially wipe it out, right?
Great time for a movie chain to make some money, right?
Exactly.
Like, gosh, did they need it?
Yeah. I mean, who cares where the stock really goes at this point? They've essentially been able to wipe out a good chunk of their debt through this, right? So there's certainly been some positives here, but it's going down, and obviously, you know, we're recording it today. Tomorrow it could jump back up, but right now it's generally kind of sliding back down. I mean, even today it's down by like another 30%. And realistically, we have to remember that if you take all of this out of the equation, fundamentally, this is a stock that's probably in that $15 to $20 range normally, right? Without any kind of extenuating circumstances. But I think there is, like you said, that little bit of a dark side, because, you know, Wall Street Bets is, you know, they're all having fun, and that's fine. That's great. But there's this very much like, you know, to the moon, diamond hands, YOLO mentality, which you're right, could be a little toxic, right? When everyone's like, hold, it's going to go back up, when it's just dropping back down, and it may never go back up again. And it's like, I get it. Like, obviously that's the way this all works. If people didn't have that mentality to begin with, and people started selling the second it hit $50 or $100, we wouldn't have had this conversation, right? So obviously something happened here, but there's also that mentality of just like, you know, hold, that someone could be looking at, you know, like you said, their life savings or a huge chunk of money that they don't necessarily have to lose, and like, oh, well, it's going to go back up, right? It's going to go back up, right? As it drops and drops and drops, right? I agree. That makes me feel a little
sad.
Yeah. And then, there's all kinds of stuff, but there are other versions of this story, right? Yeah. So a bunch of stocks did jump up. Like I said, AMC. There are a couple of others, like it was like Cost, like the headphone company, which I didn't even know they were a publicly traded company. Nokia BlackBerry. There are a lot of these like very like well-recognized brands that everyone knows BlackBerry or Nokia, but no one really has thought about them in a while, right? But, everyone got excited about it. And because a lot of these stocks were smaller, it means that it doesn't take as many people as much money to pump up the price, right? And, of course, there's stuff like crypto. So we already talked about Dogecoin, but the crypto market has seen some big swings. And, I think as of this morning, like Bitcoin's up a lot and everything. And then there are even things like the traditional, like, quote-unquote, futures of, like, silver. People piled into silver the other day, and silver prices jumped up, which is very strange because, well, I guess actually no, this is all strange, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, every part of it's strange. Because this is the thing, it kind of doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what it was or what it is. It doesn't matter that it's silver. Silver, it doesn't mean anything. It's just like this is just what people have decided. And that is the weird part of it now, that this subreddit is like ordaining value, but it's shining a mirror back on this entire system because it is devoid from reality.
Which it's hard to see where this is going to go, right? We're clearly not financial analysts, and I don't even think the financial analysts know.
I mean, look how long it took us to try and explain shorts, and we probably still got it wrong.
But like, there are a couple ways to look at it. One way, you can you're sticking it to the man. You're bankrupting the hedge funds that are trying to evil, and they're removing things. Which that is certainly a narrative. I tend to think that some short selling is actually a good thing. Maybe not excessive, crazy billionaires making money, destroying companies, but there is a certain incentive for short sellers to do research, to find out that companies may not be as strong as they think they are. It's nice to have a little bit of that sort of push and pull in the market, which I know it makes, it's like everyone wants stocks to go up forever and, no one wants a killjoy, but like, there can't just be an infinite sort of upward tick in the stock market. That's how bubbles happen, right? So some level of sort of short selling I do think is valuable, but it's also a thing where I think a lot of people forget. A lot of people made money, including hedge funds, right? I was reading an article just yesterday. A hedge fund made like hundreds of millions of dollars on GameStop as it sort of jumped because they had purchased it last year and they got out near the peak, right? So it's not quite such a clean cut narrative as like the little guy versus the man here. And I do worry, like you said. I mean, look, if a bunch of Redditors cause a global financial collapse, I'm gonna be so over it right now. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be so over it. But yeah, man. And then there are all these other ancillary stories, stuff like Robinhood, which everyone got incredibly mad about, which it sounds like they just didn't have enough cash to fund. So they had to like limit transactions and like stuff like GameStop because it
was a PR blunder. Like there was a reason, and you can decide if that reason is true or makes sense to you, which is that idea of like they have to guarantee it at a certain point and the sales, and if they can't do that, they can't do that, and they have to limit a stock or their funding gets cut off, and you can decide whether that's like whether you believe it, whether you think it's a conspiracy, and like I'm not saying one way or the other, right? Like I could understand this idea that their big money owners told them not, right? Like I get it, right? Like I understand why people would feel that way because they didn't communicate very well what their reason was. And, so like whether you believe it's true or not, it took them a while to actually come out and say that was the reason. And I can't fathom why they did that. Like at first it's like to protect our users. It's like, no. That's not it. And like Robinhood's problem is like their entire brand is around democratizing trading. And it felt like they weren't doing that. And so, this is always an issue. If you give yourself a tagline, you set a clock on it being used against you. Yeah. Any company, right? Yep. You give yourself a tagline of any kind, which is what you say is your selling point. You have now set a ticking clock on people being able to use that line against you again. And this is just Robinhood's time in the sun. I mean, their whole brand, Robinhood, is around like stealing from the rich to give to the poor. Potentially now we can see that brand was too aggressive. Right?
That was a little bit on the nose.
Yeah. And so now it's come back and it's bitten them a bit. I mean, look, they'll be fine, in my opinion, because so many people know who they are now, and so many people now have Robinhood accounts that didn't before. They're going to have a bit of a choppy time, but the brand Robinhood is now a household name. So provided they can just, because, a lot of people moved their portfolio away. Okay. if they can get through this, which they probably will, they'll be fine, because now people know that they're the place to go if you want to get stocks on your iPhone. But there's so much that's come from this. Like the story, really, this could just be the very beginning of it, because there's now talk of legislative change, right, and all that. Like, because again, it's like we're all being forced to look at something that's usually done quietly.
Mm-hmm.
Which is this whole, it's like, oh, you've got to be in the club to understand how this works. But now it's been democratized.
Yeah.
Like in the sense, like people know how it works. People are doing it. People are doing the short and stuff. You don't have to have been ordained into the club anymore to be able to have access to this stuff. And so it could be a time where that's going to stop. I don't know.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting, right? There's a real scenario here in which places like Wall Street Bets, where investors get together and they all decide, oh, look, let's all go in on this or that. And they can make real differences in the market, right? I mean, that is a very understandable thing, but I don't think it's going to be like what we saw, right? Because guess what? When you have a public forum like that, every hedge fund in the world is going to be keeping an eye on that. I guarantee you every day. And as soon as people start talking about one thing, they're going to be right there to buy the stock with everyone else. And yeah, I mean, the whole idea of pumping up and then dumping stocks is, again, not really a new concept. It's just being done in a new way. So, I mean, we'll see, right? Maybe this is the beginning of tons of more people getting into the stock market, being more informed, being able to, buy and sell and actually, like you said, be part of the big boys club without having to necessarily be invited in or whatever. Or maybe this is a footnote in history. A bunch of people made a lot of money, and ultimately a lot of people lost a bunch of money. And we think back on this as like, oh, remember that little app called Robinhood that people bought GameStop for? Ha, ha, ha. I kind of feel like this is not the last we've heard of this saga, though.
Super different episode today, clearly. We didn't really test anything. Did you test? I didn't buy anything. I wasn't even tempted. Were you tempted?
No. I mean, I don't buy any kind of stock or anything that I ever talk about or whatever. Last thing I want to do is get Martha Stewarted.
Can get you in trouble.
Yeah, no. I'm not going. If I ever go to jail, it's not gonna be for a dumb reason like that.
Reddit
play
stock.
in my court hearing 5 years from now. Like, look, he said it in the podcast. He knew it was gonna happen.
But if you did enjoy the conversation we've had today, let us know. Like, this is obviously a different type of thing for the show. So if you liked it, let us know.
Yeah, and if you didn't like it, sorry, we don't know how to describe.
Remember, there's a secret phone, all right? Just look forward to that.
Z-Flip! Z-Flip!